One day in a remote village outside Tokyo, livestock start dying overnight for some unknown reason. The corpses were all brutally ripped apart with their organs eaten out as if a monster feasted on them like Mexicans eat tacos. The villagers call Inugami, who is a special detective specialized in dealing with the paranormal, to come and investigate the case. Afterwards, we see a bunch of kids walking back home excitedly, talking about the arrival of a cool detective from Tokyo. Among them, there is this kid named Yataro, who is the son of Inugami's client. His friends tell him that he should go to the city with a detective because he is too cool and rich for these stupid mountains. They then ask him if they can visit his house to see the detective, and he tells them that they can come as long as they don't disturb the guest. After that, he turns to the fields and we see a black-haired young boy with a weird necklace working hard in them. His name is Kabane, and Yataro makes fun of him and tells him to keep his nasty face away from the guest because he smells really bad. Meanwhile, we see our detective Inugami worrying about his flat tire on the side of the road. Luckily, Yataro's mom, Mrs. Kusaka, comes by to give him a ride in her pickup truck and says that she will send someone over to take care of his car. On their way to the villa, she tells him that livestock that was up and running yesterday suddenly died overnight with their carcasses rotting away. She says that it doesn't look like the work of a human and everyone in the village is really scared. She then tells him that she hasn't told any of the children yet because she doesn't want them to be afraid of going to school, but if something were to happen to them, she doesn't want any bad rumors going around. With that, she takes him to the villa and serves him some tea while he sees Yataro and his friends peeking from around the corner to look at him. He gets out to wave at them and then walks out to stretch his back and notices the black-haired kid working in the fields. He asks the owner if he is staying home from school to work, and she says that she will fill him in about it later. After that, he hops in the hot spring outside the villa for a bath, and Yataro walks in to wash his back. He starts buttering him up and tells him how he loves Tokyo and would like to go there. After getting bored with his stupid chatter, Inugami asks him about the boy in the fields, and Yataro explains that he is nicknamed Smelly Ass. Inugami asks what that was about, and he says that it must be something he was born with, but his body smells really weird and he looks ugly as well, so they don't let him work around the guests, and no one really likes to go near him either. Inugami thinks that it's interesting and then walks out of the bath. Outside, he meets Mrs. Kusaka and asks her to let the other kid be his attendant. This makes Yataro really jealous of him, and the next day, Smelly Ass is made to take a bath and he goes to serve Inugami his breakfast. After serving the dishes, he tries to leave early, but Inugami stops him and introduces himself as an occult investigator and asks him if he saw anything strange while working in the fields. The kid introduces himself as Kabane and suggests that they talk about it after his meal, as no one in the inn likes to eat with him due to his smell. But Inugami reassures him, saying that it's nothing and that hardworking guys shouldn't worry too much about how they smell. Kabane wonders about Inugami's cleanliness, but then speaks up and says that in his opinion, a monster is behind the dead livestock case, making Inugami curious. Inugami asks him how he knew, as the client hasn't told any children about it, and he reveals that he is the one tasked with disposing of the bodies. He then says he has to take care of them on the night with full moons and that he thinks the monster will come this time as well. Hearing this, Inugami becomes excited and decides to stay there for 5 days until the next full moon. While waiting for that, he helps Kabane with his work and they get along very well. They clean the sewers, hunt down some animals, and even work the fields together. One day, while working in the fields, Inugami notices the weird stone necklace around Kabane's neck. He requests to take a close look at it and asks where he found it. Kabane says that this was the only thing that his parents left him with when he was abandoned. Inugami looks at his sad face and then reveals that it is called a like stone, and it is a very rare and special artifact. He says that there is no way someone would just leave him with such a precious stone, and this means that his parents didn't abandon him and there must be some reason behind it. He then offers him his services as a detective and says that he can help him find his parents if they are still alive, and this makes Kabane somewhat hopeful to meet his real parents one day. 5 days later, Kabane waits for Inugami on the full moon night behind the barn so they can investigate the cause of the dead livestock. But instead of the detective, Yataro walks out first and grabs him by his collar. He feels super jealous about Inugami not choosing him and starts abusing Kabane and tells him that he is just a smelly loser who was abandoned by his parents and his mom had to take care of him, and now he is taking away this opportunity from him. Kabane becomes mad and says that he wasn't abandoned, and this makes Yataro even more mad. He grabs his stone necklace and tells him to not get any funny ideas because his parents left him with some stupid rock, and snatches it away. Kabane becomes angry and punches him right in his snotty face and throws him back on the ground. With tears in his eyes, Yataro says that it hurt really bad, but when he looks up at Kabane, he sees a red-eyed monster walking like a man-eating zombie. He stands up and runs away like a sissy while zombie Kabane grabs the stone and turns back to normal. Sometime later, Inugami arrives on the scene and finds Kabane hiding behind a stack of wood looking all sad. Kabane tells him to stay away as he is the culprit and the monster behind the dead animals incident. Hearing him call himself a monster, Inugami tells him that he would find it strange, but he wants to show him something special. After that, he turns around and takes his pants off, and Kabane immediately calls 911 to report him as a child predator. But before the FBI can raid him with a SWAT team, he tells him to open his eyes and shows him his ass. It turns out Inugami has a fuzzy tail censoring his butt, and Kabane wonders why his fuzzy caliber is on the wrong side. The investigator clears his name by explaining that there are demons in this world, and they are one of them. He tells Kabane that he is a hybrid between a human and a bloodless demon called Ghoul, while he himself is a demonic raccoon dog called Bake Danuki. He then explains that the life stone around his neck is a special stone that helps his kind from keeping their urges to attack humans under control. This means that he is not the culprit, and there is something else out there who is attacking the livestock. Hearing this, Kabane picks his axe up and says that Yataro is outside and he doesn't know anything about these attacks, so they must go and protect him. On the other hand, Yataro is running away like the little snotty brat he is and remembers that when he was 5 years old, he once accidentally killed Kabane by pushing him into the canal. He hit his head, and instead of blood, something white started coming out of his wound. He got scared and ran back home, but to his surprise, Kabane came back home in time for supper. He thought that it was all of his imagination, but today's incident proved that Kabane is a real monster. He tries to run inside the house, but the door is locked, and suddenly he gets attacked by a couple of zombie dogs with chewed-out bellies and red eyes. Inugami arrives just in time to shoot one of the dogs' head off and tells Kabane to cut the other dog's head away to make it stop moving. He explains that they are ghouls and they can't die. But if you cut off their heads, their bodies become unable to move, and you must bury them deep in a narrow hole to make sure they don't regenerate their bodies either. After that, the real ghoul comes out and attacks Inugami, who is holding Yataro. It dodges his bullets and tries to stomp him, but Kabane runs forward and hits it back with his axe. They keep fighting, and the ghoul knocks his axe away from his hand. Inugami follows up from behind and tries to shoot its neck away, but it proves to be too thick for him to take off at once. Just then, Kabane punches the monster and shoves his arm down its throat and takes his head off with brute force. After that, they bury the monsters down and walk back towards the inn, and Kabane says that he can't live here anymore because Yataro now knows that he is a monster and the incidents would probably get pinned on him. Inugami agrees and says that he has an offer for him. He then points his gun at his head and reveals that in truth he was hired by his aunt to kill him. She knew about his real identity from her older sister, his mother, and kept it a secret till this day. But once these animal corpses incidents started happening, she got scared and hired him to take care of the monster in her house. He says that while the real culprit was someone else, with Yataro in this condition, she wouldn't believe him even if he told her the truth, and so he must do his job. He then asks him if he wants to find his parents, and Kabane simply looks up to him with a smile and says no before getting shot down by Inugami right in the middle of his forehead. Inugami picks his body up and goes inside the inn to deliver Yataro as well as the news about his job's completion. He says that he will take care of the body as well and then drives off back to Tokyo, with Kabane's body in the backseat of his car. On his way, Kabane suddenly wakes up and asks if he should be dead already. Inugami throws him some food and tells him to fill up and says that he's a ghoul and ghouls cannot be killed. They just become paralyzed for a little bit if you hurt their heads, but his wounds should be already healed up by now. With that, they go to Tokyo and Inugami takes him to his Inugami Detective Agency's office. He says that to the villagers he's already dead now, so he shouldn't worry about them, and now he can work here with him until he finds out where his real parents are. Note this down in the comments section as free child labor acquisition technique number 420. He sprays in with a perfume and gives him the bottle as well before saying that it is a special perfume that demons use to hide their natural musk. He then tells him to change into a pair of edgy clothes and goes out, and just then two kids walk in while fighting over who gets to eat the first slice of pizza, and they wonder who this ugly country boy is wearing their clothes standing in the middle of their office. Inugami introduces him to the two kids, Shiki and Akira, and reveals that Shiki is also a human-demon hybrid like Kabane. He further explains that usually demons keep their existence hidden from humans in a way to keep their identities safe. But sometimes some demons step out of line, and that's when they step in to make things right. Right from the start, Shiki decides to be a douchebag towards Kabane and asks how old he is. Kabane says that he is 13, and Shiki tells him to keep that in mind because he is 14 and older than him. Then he tells him to sleep outside on the sofa and walks back to his room. On the other hand, Kabane stares at Akira for some time and he asks if he needs anything. Kabane says that he was wondering how beautiful of a girl she was, and this makes Akira mad, and he runs back to his room saying that he is a boy. Later on, Shiki sits down with Kabane and eats his pizza. He says that he isn't that big of a villain, that he won't share his food, and tells him to eat up. Kabane says that he has never had pizza before in his life, and this makes Shiki so surprised that he drops his rude act for a bit and tells him to live a little. After that, they all go back to their bed, and Shiki wonders why Inugami brought Kabane there. Akira says that it must be because he has nowhere else to go, and perhaps he was abandoned, or it could be that he is really strong. Shiki decides to find out and lays a sticky silk wire trap on Kabane's way to the bathroom. Kabane falls down, and Shiki asks him if he was abandoned and tries to provoke him, but Kabane says that he wasn't abandoned and pulls his foot out of the silk, injuring his ankle. But to Shiki's surprise, there's no blood, and the wound immediately heals up with a purple flame. The next day, the agency gets a special request from the police headquarters to go deal with a demon-related incident. Inugami and the others get in the car and arrive at the location of the incident. It turns out that in an old-looking house, a mother and child are lying unconscious inside a room covered by millions of small bugs. The police have sealed the room shut and have already lost one of their men who tried to go inside and got covered in bugs immediately and fell unconscious as well. Inugami walks in with his force of child laborers and takes a peek inside the room. He explains that these bugs are called 3 corpse bugs. Usually, they just nibble on some dead skin when you sleep and are pretty harmless, but they do have their favorite dishes. He says that they are surrounding something in the center of the room, and that object must be the source of all of this, and so they must remove that from there. He says that he can turn his whole body into iron and walk in safely, but that would take some time, and considering it has already been 30 minutes since all of this started, he would like for it to end soon, or else the mother and the child won't make it out alive. Shiki says that he can use his string to lay a trap and pull the object from inside like Spider-Man. Inugami lets him have his shot at it. Shiki pulls the door open a little bit and starts putting a web inside, but to everyone's surprise, the bugs start eating his silk and his whole existence becomes useless. Akira is too scared from the bugs and is already too big of a sissy to do anything about it. Inugami thinks that there is no other choice for them to wait for him to turn fully into iron and then walk in himself, but Kabane says that he can do it if they want and walks in. The bugs immediately cover him from head to toe when he keeps walking like a Giga Chad, and Inugami explains that being a human-ghoul hybrid, he doesn't have blood in his body. The bugs paralyze their target by injecting anesthesia in their bloodstream, and they can't eat through him because he can regenerate his body. Besides that, at one point he must have had emotions and feelings like other people, but his aunt made sure to treat him poorer than Harry Potter, so now he has grown up to be really selfless and emotionally dumb. He does what needs to be done, and that makes him really strong, but at the same time it's really sad. Kabane keeps walking forward and eventually picks up the object in the center, which turns out to be a pair of red shoes. As soon as he does, the bugs go away, and Inugami lets the paramedics rush in and save the family. Later that evening, he explains that the favorite dish of those bugs is guilt, and from the looks of it, these shoes must be stolen. Just then, the elder son of the family walks up to them and thanks them with tears in his eyes. He says that they are a poor family run by a single mother, so if they don't need to move houses, they would prefer to stay unless the reason for the bugs' attack was something in the house. Inugami says that the shoes were the reason, and as long as they stay away from doing bad things, they should be fine. The brother starts crying and explains that their mother thinks last about herself, and she's been wearing these rundown pairs of shoes for decades. One day, his younger brother brought these shoes to give her, and being the older brother himself, he knew that he had stolen them, so he scolded him for doing the wrong thing. The younger brother must have felt really guilty, and that's when the bugs started swarming them. Their mother hates bugs, but she instantly jumped and hugged the younger kid, and that's how it all happened. He thanks everyone and goes away, and they all decide to go back home. Before getting in the car, Kabane asks Inugami if he can meet his parents if he works for him, and Inugami starts smiling. He says that as a detective it is his job and he will take his fee out of his pay, and they all go back home. Later that night, Shiki sits down with Kabane and tells him about his backstory. He says that he is the son of a human father and a spider demon mother, and they got separated when he was really young. Kabane asks if she is still alive, and he says that he doesn't know, and usually a parent would try to find their children, but he's still here, and it's been a lot of years. Kabane says that it's no reason to lose hope, and it could be that they are still trying to find them, and it's a big, big world, and at first he had lost hope as well, but Inugami helped reignite his flames, and now he's not going to lose them. Hearing this, Shiki gets up and walks back to his room and tells Kabane to come with him, and that he will show him his room as well. On the other hand, Inugami enjoys some Meg coffee and calls the police superintendent Inari and tells her that he finished the job she hired him for successfully. He then tells her about finding a human-demon hybrid kid with the Life Stone. She becomes interested and asks if he is dangerous, and he says that he is, but at the same time, he might be the star of hope that they are looking for. The next day, Inugami asks Shiki and Akira to go take Kabane to meet Inari. Kabane asks who she was, and he explains that she is a fox demon who holds a high position in the police, and as a detective, they often have to ask for favors from them. Before they leave, Inugami gives him a special charm and tells him to keep it on himself just in case. After that, they all head out to the police station to meet Inari. Turns out she's a hot vixen who likes to use her charm to turn everyone in the police department into her simp, and that's how she has climbed up the ranks. Kabane and the others get inside the building and ask the receptionist that they want to see the superintendent, and they should have a meeting booked with her. The old fart tries to shoo them off, but then a young girl walks in and introduces herself as one of Inari's personal guards, Khan. She says that Inari is waiting for the kid named Kabane and only takes him back with her. They leave the salty Shiki and Akira behind and go inside this small meeting room where Inari is waiting for them. She tells Kabane to take a seat across from her and introduces herself. She then says that Inugami told her everything about him and his lifestone and asks if she can take a closer look at it. Kabane, being the bird brain he is, says sure and hands over the lifestone to her, and she explains that it is a rare stone that controls their urges and says that she and Inugami's kind has never gotten along, but for the sake of demons' peaceful coexistence, they have decided to play nice with each other. Her kind needs to feed off of different emotions and feelings that humans release, but with the help of this stone, they won't need to be bound by that desire, and says that she will now go and see how to mass produce it. She makes Khan take his head off and then calls in 2 officers to seal his head inside a suitcase and to get rid of the rest of his body. She then tells Khan to bring the head up to her room and to deal with the other 2 kids who came alongside him. Khan says that she is like a mother to her, and she would always obey all her orders. She then gets patted on her head before being called a good girl and becomes happy. After that, she transforms into Kabane and heads down to meet Shiki and Akira while holding the suitcase in her hand. Shiki asks the fake Kabane where he was and what's inside the suitcase, and he replies that he was talking to Lady Inari and he is supposed to deliver the suitcase to her room later on. Hearing him call her lady, Shiki cringes at his smelly face and asks him why he's referring to that old hag as such, and this makes Khan really mad, and her illusion comes off as her face transforms into her fox form. She then undoes her transformation and jumps up the railing. She launches a big fireball at them from her tail and then shoots a few more like a machine gun. Shiki and Akira run around and hide behind some furniture and ask her what she was doing and if she wanted to set the whole place on fire with all these normal humans inside. She says that it doesn't matter, and as soon as a person enters this building, they get under Inari's Jinjutsu and stop feeling or thinking anything. They just do their jobs as they should. She then starts attacking them again, and Shiki forms a barrier between them by pulling in different furniture using his silk. He then pulls the string that he attached to her suitcase in secret and snatches it away as well. They open it up and get spooked by Kabane's ugly head and run away from there to get out of Khan's sight. On the other hand, Khan starts panicking at the thought of not fulfilling Inari's orders and goes berserk. Meanwhile, Kabane tells Shiki to throw him at Khan, and he will deal with her. And they do the combo move. Throwing Kabane's stinky head jutsu, Kabane's head smashes into Khan and he bites her in her collarbone, making her lose blood and faint on the ground. The fire around them also dies down, and it turns out it was all an illusion and the people inside were put to sleep. After that, he regenerates his body and lets Akira see his Excalibur, and Shiki tells him to cover up with his jacket. After that, they all walk out and meet up with Inugami, who is waiting for them with his car outside. Inugami says that it went just as he had planned and gives Inari a call. On the other hand, Inari is heading out to research the Lifestone so she can mass produce it, but suddenly it transforms into a raccoon dog doll and her phone starts ringing. She picks it up and Inugami calls her out for attacking his child laborers. He says that she must be getting old to not be able to see through his shape-shifting technique, and tells her that the Lifestone belongs to Kabane, and if she tries to take it away again, she will have to deal with him. Besides that, now she owes him a favor for causing all this trouble and cuts the call. Back in his car, we find out Inugami gave Kabane a fake Lifestone as a good luck charm to put around his neck and told him to keep the real Lifestone in his head. After dealing with all of this, he says that they should eat out and throw a welcoming party for Kabane. Shiki and Akira fight over what to eat and eventually decide to go for both Chinese food and pancakes and end up becoming sick. On their walk back home, Inugami tells Kabane how they find work in this business and says that there are web searches and word of mouth, but most often it is due to their signboard. It emits a special light that attracts demons and people under the influence of demons, and in this way work usually finds them itself. Incidentally, the sign was made for them by Inari, and so they have this sort of collaborative relationship with her. Just then, they see an injured Khan walking up to them, and Shiki and Akira get in their fighting stance, but then Khan falls on the ground as her stomach grumbles like elephants of Africa. They feed her some pizza, and she explains that she's a good girl and Inari gave her a mission and she doesn't quit her mission midway, so she must deliver Kabane's head to her. She then tries to attack him, but Inugami stops her and tells her to get off the table or else Inari would be mad at her, and she instantly becomes docile and starts acting like a good girl. He then tells her to say thanks for the food and to recycle the trash, and they decide to take care of her for the time being. Just then, a man walks in inside their office and Kabane notices a strange smell around him. Shiki explains that it's a human influenced by a demon and it means that they have a new job. The man sits down in their half-bar, half-office and has a drink served by Inugami. He complains about this girl named Mao that he has fallen in love with. She works in the red light district and he wants to confess his feelings to her, but whenever he waits for her outside, he can't see her leaving the building and never gets the chance to talk to her. While hearing about his love problems, Kabane wonders why half of their office is set up as a bar, and Shiki explains that long ago, Inugami used to work with a partner who wanted to have a bar set up in the office, but now they ain't together, and it's best not to ask him about it anymore as it's a sensitive topic for him. Meanwhile, Akira picks up on the conversation and starts saying how love is an amazing thing. He says how Shiki and Kabane are the result of love between a human and a demon, and Kabane becomes interested in learning more about this love thing after that. He walks up to Inugami and says that he wants to go with the customer and help them confess their love so he can learn about it as well. He wants to do it because his parents found love as well, and learning about it might help him understand his parents more. Inugami looks at his dumb face and decides to let him do it. He tells Shiki and Akira to help him as well and tells Khan that if she helps them, he will let her have Khan's head. With all that settled, he tells the customer that the kids will take care of his request and tells them all to get going. Just then, the customer sees a mouse inside the room and instantly catches it like a cat. His face looks somewhat like a cat as well, and he says that he has been collecting these to give to his lover. Inugami realizes that it must be the work of a cat demon and tells Akira to stay behind as he is afraid of scary and disgusting things like mouse corpses and stuff. With that, the rest of them go out and sit in a cafe across from Mao's working place. The kids ask him for Mao's picture and he shows it to them and says that she should be coming out as her shift is about to be over, but strangely enough, he can't notice her walking out ever. Just then, the kids notice a cat demon walking out in the form of a pink cat with split tails. They walk to the alley with the customer and approach the cat demon Mao and say that they are there from the Inugami's detective agency. Hearing his name, Mao says that she recognizes the name and asks what they wanted from an innocent cat like her. They say that their customer, Yoruno, has fallen in love with her and wants to confess his feelings. Mao transforms into her human form and shocks Yoruno and then says that she was going to add him to his collection so he could bring her mouses as well, but it looks like her seduction hasn't kicked in fully yet. She then reveals 3 other humans with mice in their mouth who have almost completely transformed into cats. She says that there is no love and it's all due to her powers, but just then, Khan jumps down from above like the fox she is and grabs Mao in her hands. She takes her to Yoruno and tells him to go ahead with his confession. He presents her with a bag of dead mice that he has been collecting and tells her that he has been living his life in depression and was losing hope every day, but then he met her, and she was the first ray of light that helped him stay afloat, and so he wants to be with her even if it means that he must turn into a cat. After that, they leave them be and walk back home to report to Inugami. Once they are back, Khan asks Inugami to fulfill his promise and demands for Kabane's head. He tells her to close her eyes and then goes to the fridge to grab an orange and transforms it into his head before giving it to her and seeing her off. Once the dumb fox is gone, he asks Kabane if he learned anything about love, and he explains that he found out that love is a lot like light, a ray of hope. He hands Inugami a pack of tissue wipes and says that he got them on his way back to give it to him as a gift. He says that for him, Inugami is a ray of light who gave him the reason to live, and people tend to give their lights useful gifts, so he got him tissues because they are quite handy. He then turns around to talk to Shiki and Akira and tells them that they are somewhat light for him as well, so he will get them something soon too. A few days later, Inugami reveals that Yoruno and Mao got together, and it turns out she fell in love with him after his confession, and they are living together now. The humans return to cats should be back to normal in a few weeks as well. While Shiki wonders just what kind of a world he lives in, Akira feels amazed at Kabane, who managed to solve his first case before himself, even though he joined them much later, and he starts feeling inferior to him. Sometime later, he walks up to Inugami and says that he has become Kabane's apprentice, and Shiki explains that there was a cockroach in the bathroom and Kabane took care of it, so Akira now calls him master. Akira says that he can take on any cases alongside Kabane and requests for a job. Looking at that, Inugami says that there is a mission that he was planning on going to with Kabane himself, but if he wants, he can leave it to the 2 of them. He then explains that there is some construction work going on near the Shibuya River, and they are trying to divert its direction, but lately many construction workers have been dying in mysterious ways and their skeletons have been found floating in the river. He says that he has a good idea who the culprits could be, as a native group of demons live in the river, and they must be angry about the construction work. Shiki says that that place is full of dirt and insects, and due to the construction work, the river has practically become a sewer. Inugami confirms that it's going to be a nasty job and asks if Akira still wants to do it. Akira feels disgusted about it but says that he will do it and goes to change into his cleaning gear. The following day, they go under the bridge along the river into the dark tunnel. Kabane explains that they should first go find the native demons to hopefully come to a peaceful solution. While walking through, a massive leech falls on top of Akira, and he starts screaming, but Kabane shuts his mouth up with his hand and tells him to stay quiet or else they will alert everyone of their presence. He then takes off the leeches of their heads and throws them in the river. Akira asks him why he doesn't kill them, and he explains that he doesn't like to kill others, be it humans, insects, or monsters, unless there is no other option. In simple terms, they attack us to save their lives, and unless they pose a threat to him, he doesn't have to kill anything. Hearing him talk about all this, Akira wonders how cool Kabane is and says that he really is something else. He tells him that he reminds him of his older brother and starts telling him about his backstory. He explains that he belongs to a tribe of snow demons who live in the mountains of Amuri. Their village had this weird system where all of its members were females and males were born once every 100 years. That's why they were looked after very carefully, but he has always been a crybaby and his older brother would always cheer him up. When they were fleeing from the village, he got separated from his older brother. And that's why he joined Inugami in hopes of finding his brother. Hearing him speak about all this, Kabane asks if he can control ice considering how he is a snow demon, and Akira says that he can, but he is really bad at it because it requires a lot of focus. Just then, he gets attacked by a massive frog demon who grabs him by his face, but Kabane knocks the amphibian down with a metal pipe. The monster tries to attack him again, but just then, a small raccoon dog arrives on the scene and kicks the frog away. He has a bottle of blood and a letter around its neck that reads to Akira and Kabane from Inugami. In the letter, he tells them that the frog demons are behind the attacks and they have gone crazy after eating humans and must be wiped out. He tells them to lure them out using the blood in the bottle and tells them to take care of this mission. Kabane says that he is okay with this, but Akira feels worried. Kabane asks if he should see his sissy ass out, but Akira thinks back on how he wants to grow stronger for the sake of being dependable and says that he will stay there even if he pees his pants. I wonder if any sissy weeb in the comments section would be interested in buying those. With that, they both walk deep into the tunnel alongside Mr. Raccoon Dog and pour the blood inside the river. Suddenly, a huge number of frog demons jump out and attack them, and as expected, Kabane and the Raccoon Dog fights off all of them while Akira sits in the corner wondering how he will sell those sissy peed-on pants of his. Things start looking bad for them as they get overwhelmed by the sheer number of green-faced toads, but Akira starts thinking back on how he wanted to grow stronger and dependable, and in an effort to be useful, he releases his ice element and freezes everything in the tunnel besides Kabane's head and Mr. Raccoon Dog. Kabane compliments him on taking out all the monsters and they take a selfie together. Meanwhile, Mr. Raccoon Dog walks further up and meets up with the elder of the frog demons. It turns out he was Inugami all along, and the frog elder thanks him for his services and explains how his former brothers turned evil after eating human flesh and they had started eating the eggs and young ones of their own kind as well. Inugami welcomes him back and marks the mission as a success. A few days later, Kabane is on cleaning duty and is wiping the hallway. He reaches the far end of the hallway and remembers Inugami's warning to never open the door here and wonders if it is fine to move the cartons to clean the floor. Suddenly, the door opens and a white hand comes out of it and pulls him inside. Later that noon, Shiki finds the wiping mop on the floor and talks to Inugami about it. He tells him where he found it and how he is concerned about Kabane's sudden disappearance. Hearing his story, Inugami becomes worried and rushes to the room at the far end of the hallway and enters it alongside the other kids. Inside, they see the whitest dude in the history of mankind sitting on a gaming chair in front of a Mega 6-monitor setup. He has Kabane sit beside him on the floor and open water bottles and food cans for him, and Inugami says that that's exactly what he was worried about. He calls the American out by his name, Mihai, and makes him take his headphones off. Mihai looks at Inugami and greets him and asks why he never told him about getting such an obedient and trainable slave. Shiki and Akira ask if he was living there the whole time, and the guy says yes and introduces himself as Mihai the Vampire. He is the head of the information and communication tech for the agency and says that from now on he is appointing Kabane as his personal slave. Inugami starts twitching his eye at that appointment and tells the kids to walk out with him for a moment. Once out, he explains that Mihai is his old partner and he is a vampire, which are considered top of the top among the demons. They possess superhuman level of physical strength, knowledge, and riz. They don't ever age past their prime and are almost immortal. On top of all this, Mihai hates boredom, so he has obtained knowledge about and trained himself in almost all sorts of professional skills. Once he ran out of things to do, he started to become bored of this world, and in order to stop him from turning into the main villain of this anime, he decided to invite him to the agency, and here he became addicted to gacha games like Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail and likes to stay in his room all day. Besides being a sweaty gamer, he is also really tech-savvy and is the one responsible for creating their company website, as well as for keeping their data secure from the likes of Inari. He tells them to just stay out of the hallway if they want to live an easy life. The next day, Kabane is back to being a dutiful slave and serving his white master. Shiki and Akira barge into the vampire's room and tell him to stop abusing their already dead boy into becoming his slave. Mihai offers to let him go if they defeat him in an arm wrestling match, and Shiki takes him up on that offer. They sit down and Mihai instantly knocks him down, and Akira refuses to even give it a try. Kabane asks if he can try as well, and Mihai says that it is his job to grant the request of his slaves, and then beats him instantly as well. Later that noon, Kabane is sent out to buy ingredients for their supper, and on his way he thinks about growing stronger so he can protect everyone he cares about at the agency. He eventually sits down in a park to take a break and wonders if he should train, and just then, Khan falls down from the tree behind him. She turns around and notices Kabane sitting on the bench there and asks what he was doing there. Kabane thinks that she is there for his head and tries to pretend that he doesn't have one by zipping his hoodie up, but Khan says that she won't fall for this trick again, and then sadly says that it doesn't matter as Inari doesn't need it anymore, and when she went to give his head to her, there was already a new fox demon with her and she didn't even bother looking at her. She says that she can't go home the way she is right now because she's been a bad girl. Kabane asks her to fight with him, and they both instantly engage in close combat. They both match each other initially, but then Khan gets on top of Kabane and starts beating the living brains out of his smelly face, but then he hits her back with a headbutt and sends her flying back on the ground with a bloody nose. She starts crying and says that no wonder Inari abandoned her because she is so weak. Kabane doesn't know what to do about it and holds her hand in hopes of comforting her. Khan eventually cries herself to sleep, and they end up sitting together on the bench until night when she wakes up. Kabane tells her that if it's too hard to go to Inari, she should come live with them at Inugami's place, but she says that she cannot because he is a raccoon dog demon and she's a fox demon. She then looks at him with bright eyes and says that she wouldn't mind living with him right here at the park, and she knows that she won't starve there because there are sparrows and pigeons there. He says that he has to go buy and bring ingredients for supper back home, and she asks him if it's his mission. He says that it's like a chore and says that he will be back for her once he's done with it, and it shouldn't take too long, and they make a promise. She says that she will be waiting for him and lets go of his hand. On the other hand, Inugami becomes surprised to see Mihai out of his room, and he says that he hurt his hand while arm wrestling with Kabane and it will take a week for it to heal, so he will be enjoying his time by playing with his slaves. He then tricks and locks Inugami inside his room with a bomb keypad attached to it, which will blow up if he messes with it. When the kids arrive, he tells them that Inugami is busy with a separate job and wants them to take care of this special job that he has found for them. Shiki becomes excited and says that he wants to try his new skill and reveals it by heating the place up and making himself sweat a lot, and it turns him invisible because spider silk and anime plot. With that, they get to the details of their mission, and Mihai explains that their target is a company called Bug-Bite Electronics. 3 years ago, they had 16 employees try to isekai themselves in one of their plants, but the year right after, those numbers went down to 0 and the company became profitable once again. Their mission is to go inside and find out how they managed to do it, and for that, they split up into 2 teams. Team A would consist of Kabane and Akira, who will wait for Team B, Shiki, and Mihai in the form of his high-tech remote control car called Mihai Magnum to open up the doors from inside. Once inside, Shiki notices light coming out of one of the rooms, and after taking a sneak peek inside, he sees a bunch of people working in a row while looking like depressed zombies. Suddenly, one of the men runs out of the room while crying that he quits, but then he is confronted by manager Rika. She takes him to the employee counseling office and tells him to relax while Shiki follows them from behind. Once inside, a mosquito demon puts her straw inside the man's ear and drinks up his brains from inside. It turns out the manager and her 2 sisters are in charge of the building, and they are mosquito demons. Mihai concludes that they eat up their victim's brain and leave the rest of their organs to keep working mindlessly. In this way, they keep the people in the company working without any complaints. Say. Looking at this horrible sight, Akira does what he's best at and faints out. Shiki decides that the enemies are too strong for them to take on and says that they should regroup and go back home and wait for Inugami to come back and decide what to do next. As he walks back to meet up with Kabane, Mihai starts getting irritated at Shiki for being too calm-minded and reasonable. He decides to mess things up purposefully and starts running Mihai Magnum into the wall like a Chinese woman. The sisters hear the noise and walk out to see what was up. Erika finds the toy car on the ground and takes it for herself and looks around just in case. The other two soon follow up and they decide to split up and check the whole building while Shiki hides away in the corner like the little insect he is. Once they are gone, he thinks that he should hurry up and meet up with the others before he turns into a brainless idiot like Kabane. But then Erika finds him using her massive mosquito head and says that her sister had forbidden them from killing someone to stay out of Inari's sight, but given the circumstances, she must put him down or at least turn him into a mindless monkey. As she bends down to eat his brains, Mihai shocks the living hell out of her bug eyes using the electric mod in the car and asks Shiki why he is sitting there like a sissy. But to his surprise, Shiki is breathing loudly and looks more scared than normal. He finds out that in reality he suffers from some trauma and all that tough guy act is to hide his weakness, and with that realization, he starts smiling and says that he will be a fun toy to play with. While breathing hard and sitting there like a frozen duck, Shiki thinks back to his childhood memories when he was with his mother. He wonders how they got separated but knows that he has been extremely afraid of scary things, and if he can't remember it, it must mean that something terrible happened. On the other hand, Mihai tells Kabane and Akira to go save Shiki and leads them into the other demon's sister, Momoka. Meanwhile, he starts scaring Shiki further with descriptions of what is going to happen to him if he doesn't move, and this makes him mad, and he ends up damaging the toy car with a punch. This wakes him up as well, and he decides to finally fight back. He increases his invisibility and runs away from the mosquito lady and makes her use her special ability, which lets her increase her sensitivity and be able to look at different footprints like carbon dioxide, body temperature, and sweat. Using this to his advantage, Shiki confuses her by surrounding the whole area with his strings and captures her in a strong spider web binding. After that, he reveals himself to be the real son of Peter Parker and jumps down from the ceiling above and lands on Erika's bug-eyed face with his shoes. After taking her down, he falls down and praises himself for conquering his fear, and thinks back on the moment when Inugami once told him that he had some information about his parents, and if he would like to know it, but he refused to talk about it, saying that he is comfortable with his new life at the agency and doesn't want to know about his past. He wonders if he will finally be able to handle the rest of that conversation with Inugami and decides to ask him about it once this mission is over. Just then, Kabane and Akira arrive while dragging Momoka behind them from her hair like savages. They tie her up in Shiki's sticky white stuff and wonder about their next move. Kabane says that they should fight for sure now as it's 3 versus 1, and Shiki says that he must agree as well given the fact that they would erase all the evidence if they leave, making Mihai's collected data useless. While they are discussing all this, the eldest of the Bug's sisters, Rika, walks in from the other side of the hallway. She calls her sisters useless for losing against 2 tiny farts in a toy car because even she knows Akira is useless and doesn't count him. She walks up and asks if they would forget everything and go away without chasing after this incident even further, but Kabane says that it's out of the option due to how many people they have harmed and it's their job to stop them. Rika says that it means the negotiations have broken down, so she must take care of this herself and wonders whose brain to suck first. She spins the wheel inside her head like Steve Harvey, and her color lands on her own sisters, so she starts off with Erika and then follows it up with Momoka, taking care of the 2 herself. After that, she transforms fully into her mosquito demon form and starts walking towards the kids. Kabane realizes that Shiki is too tired to deal with this, and Akira is well Akira, so he steps up himself. He engages with her and tries to go for her vital organs, but Rika holds him off with her disgusting arms and stabs through his chest with her straw of a mouth. Shiki musters up enough strength to run forward but gets put down immediately with a hard slap, and Akira takes offense to it and wonders how he can dare go down before himself. He uses Splash like a Magikarp, and it does nothing, so Rika puts him to sleep as well with a slap from one of her hairy legs. With both his friends out, Kabane wonders what to do and remembers how he wanted to grow stronger. He knows that he can't defeat the bug lady with his current strength, but tries to force his body despite it, and ends up breaking his own bones. Just then, Mihai decides to kick in with some advice no jutsu, and tells him that the reason he failed to overpower him during the arm wrestling match, as well as why he can't defeat the disgusting bug in front of him, is because he is suppressing his demonic power and using his human power. If he truly wants to save his friends, he should give in to his instincts and let the demon out and use his own power to destroy the enemy standing in front of him. With this, Kabane looks back and wonders what he wants to do right now deep down in his heart, and the answer comes out that he wants to rip the disgusting arms out of this bug lady and save his friends, and he starts screaming like Goku. Suddenly, he skips past all the Super Saiyan levels and jumps straight to Super Saiyan God and rips her arms off. Rika falls back and he asks her if she needs a hand while holding her arms, and then looks at his own power and realizes that he is actually OP. While wondering if he could rule this world like the main character in an isekai anime, he walks up to Rika to finish her off, but then Inugami comes out of his room and talks to him using Mihai Magnum. He compliments him on his good job and tells him to come back now and that they will give the info to Inari and let her handle the rest of it. Kabeni says ok, and just then the new young fox demon child whom Inari appointed after Khan walks in and says that he will take care of the rest. He introduces himself as Nobumaru and walks up to Rika and plants a few fire seeds in her body. He then snaps his fingers and sets her on fire before walking up to the other sisters and doing the same to them as well, leaving nothing but their ashes behind. He then talks to Kabene about his views on if killing them was alright and then tells him to go take his spider friend back home as he looks beat up and dehydrated as well. Before he leaves, he tells Kabene another secret and says that Inari hasn't given up on his lifestone and he has been tailing him for quite some time on her orders. Making Inugami mad would be bad for them, so they won't use force to take the stone away from him, but if he were to give it to her willingly, Inugami won't interfere, and that's what Inari is hoping for. He then tells him to be careful as they are cunning demons after all. Kabene says that he will be careful and asks him why he told him all this, and Nobumaru reveals that in reality he really hates Inari, so that's why. After that, they all leave the company building and walk back home, and Akira becomes mad at Mihai for lying to them about the difficulty of this mission. Mihai speaks up in his defense and says that they should be thanking him because they would never grow up under Inugami, who gives them easy missions and protects them from the shadows. Inugami tells him that it's true that the boys have grown far more than he had thought, but if he tries anything like that again, he would send him back to Romania packed in ice to talk to Andrew Tate until he dies. After that, they all go to sleep, and Mihai says that unless he wants to kill him himself, he would have to come up with ways to entertain him, and he has taken a liking to the boys and might impart some of his wisdom to them again sometime. Later that night, Kabene checks up on Shiki and Akira's heartbeat and feels relieved to see that they are alive. The next morning, he tails Shiki like his mom with a thoughtful expression on his face. He seems to be forgetting about something, and when Akira asks, he suddenly remembers about his promise to Khan and runs out of the house to see her. He goes to the park and calls out to her, and she falls down from the tree like the apple she is. She asks him what took so long as he was going to come back after dropping off ingredients at home. He says that a sudden mission came up and he had to go, and then things kept coming up one after another, and he kind of forgot about her. This makes her really sad, and just then 2 fishes fall down from the tree as well, and she reveals that she caught them for them to eat, but they have now gone bad because he didn't come. He feels sad for her and tries to comfort her while Nobumaru watches over them from a distance and whispers that Kabene should be more careful. On the other hand, Shiki approaches Inugami and says that he wants to talk about his parents with him, and that now he is ready to hear the truth. The next morning, they all go to Shiki's hometown to meet his uncle, Aikyo. Shiki says that before separating from his mother, he used to live here, and after that, he moved in with his uncle in Tokyo. Once in the city, Inugami goes to book rooms for them at an inn, and the kids walk inside a souvenir shop to buy some stuff. There, Kabene comes across an old folklore storybook, which tells about the legend of Nishikigumo. He takes interest in it, and Shiki says that it is a popular folklore in this area. They all give it a read and find out that once upon a time, there lived a boy named Shige. One day after returning home from his work, he saw a big spider going through his food pile. Looking at that, Shige decided to do what a sane man would do and walk out of the house, which was now owned by the spider. Or at least that's what he should have done, but instead the kind-hearted and dumb-minded Shige shared his food with the spider and told it to make itself at home. The next day when he woke up, he saw his run-down shack fill up with golden spider web. From that day on, he sold the golden silk and became rich and lived happily ever after. Shiki says that there are stories like that everywhere and then notices a pink-haired kid staring at him from the shop's door. Just then, Inugami walks in with Aikyo and says that he ran into him earlier than expected, and they all decide to walk into the woods by a river to sit down and talk to each other. While walking through, Shiki hears a familiar voice calling his name but thinks that he must be hearing things. They all sit down, and Aikyo introduces himself as a scholar who researches folklore and finds the truth hidden within them. Shiki reveals that despite being fully human, Aikyo knows about the existence of demons, but he doesn't interact too much with them, so as to not cause any trouble for anyone. Aikyo starts teasing Shiki, but he says that they are there to hear about his mother, and he explains by telling a story. He reveals that it happened a long time ago when they were still young, and he used to tag along with his elder brother, Shiki's father. At the time, they were researching the legend of the golden webbing and were traveling across the forest to find clues. That's when they ran into Shiki's mother, Kume, who was a spider demon. After that, he tells Shiki that there are some things that he has kept hidden from him until now, but now it's the right time for him to know. Inugami takes the other kids away and lets Shiki have a heart-to-heart with his uncle. Sometime later, Shiki walks out and meets up with them and reveals that they are both dead. His father died before he was born, while his mother got sick and passed away when he was 5 years old. He adds that the reason he might not be able to remember all that is because he was really traumatized after seeing her dead body as a child. He tries to act tough and keeps a hard smiling face in front of them, but Kabane catches on to it and calls him out. Inugami asks him about Akio and goes out to check on him, while the kids get inside a hot public bath and enjoy themselves. While they are wondering about ways to cheer Shiki up, Nobumaru walks in with his Excalibur at full display and complains that they should have told him before going out of the city and that it took him quite some time to reach them. With that, he reveals his fox ears and tails and surprises Shiki and Akira, who didn't know him before, and he then tells them that they look sad, so they should go out and explore the area and see fireflies at the waterfront. After that, they all go out in the woods and check out the fireflies, and Kabane thanks Nobumaru for the suggestion. Nobumaru asks Kabane if he isn't glad that Shiki's parents are dead, because if he found out that his parents were dead while Shiki's were alive, he won't be able to feel truly happy for him, but Kabane says that he doesn't understand what he's talking about. Meanwhile, Shiki walks up to a scary-looking tree and starts getting flashbacks from his childhood. Kabane and Nobumaru walk up to him and ask what he was thinking, and he suddenly starts running forward into the woods. He runs into a stone and then crosses a small water stream, and following his childhood memories, he remembers that when he was young, he would play with his mother in these woods, but she would always go out for some time to see his uncle for some work. He would always wait for her, but one day she didn't come back, so he got impatient and followed after her to see where she went. He eventually found a little building hidden deep within the woods, and when he walked in, he saw a nightmarish view of her mother tied to a table under a wild monster. He started screaming and immediately collapsed on the scene, and later when he woke up, he was in his uncle's room and he told him that his mother got sick at work, and so she must stay alone for some time before she recovers. For years, he lived with him without prying too much into his work and what he was doing with his mother in fear of finding out about a cursed and painful reality. They all reach the building, and Nobumaru reveals that it looks like an artificial breeding lab, and there have been rumors and reports in the past of a special healing silk that could heal anything and even act as a replacement for human organs. This silk was being sold in the market and had originated from human and demon hybrids, but information about the case was covered up by Inugami about a year ago. Shiki remembers that it was the same time when Inugami told him about finding his parents the first time when he refused to talk about it. He says that he is done waiting and now he will take revenge from his uncle for hurting his mother. He says that he will kill him and asks them if they will stop him, but Kabane says no and asks where to bury the body. Meanwhile, Inugami calls Akio out and takes him out in the woods to have a talk. He reveals that he knows everything about his research and that he was the one who has been keeping his work from being published all these years. Akio becomes mad and asks why he did it and starts revealing the truth like some villain in Scooby-Doo. He explains that when he and his brother found Kumi, they realized that the legend about the golden webbing was true, and the spiders behind it were actually spider demons like Kumi. It seemed like knowing that fact was enough for his brother, and he even fell in love with her, but for him, he wanted that power for himself. That's when one day his brother accidentally fell down in the woods and died. But by that time, Kumi was already pregnant with Shiki. Sometime later, Kumi came to his apartment with her baby who had come down with influenza. The human world had an easy cure for this, but in the demonic world, there were none. He took the baby to a human hospital and Shiki healed up fine, but at that time, Kumi realized that she wanted to raise her kid as a human, but it proved to be too difficult for her as a demon. That's when he offered her a proposal about letting him continue his experiments on her in exchange for money, and Kumi happily accepted, saying that she could do anything for her boy. After that, he started experimenting on her with all sorts of creatures from the woods based on the finding that the golden webbing must be the product of a mutant. That's when young Shiki found her during one of the experiments, and it traumatized him, so he took him away from Kumi. With that, the experiments continued until Kumi was on the verge of breaking, but then he finally managed to produce the legendary golden webbing, which can cure anything, including impossible diseases like a severe lack of riz and depression in all you viewers. After hearing all this, Inugami takes out his phone and reveals that he was relaying all of this to Shiki and tells him to do as he pleases. Shiki uses his sticky web and pulls Akio up a tree and decides to hang him to death. He starts crying for his life and asks Inugami how he can let children kill people, but Inugami says that it's just as simple as being prepared to get killed yourself if you are ready to kill others. Just then, Akira walks out from the woods weeping like a sissy and asks them where they were. He says that their phones were busy all this time and it was dark, and he got so scared that a bear or something would attack him. Inugami tells him to calm down and then suddenly notices a white snake centipede monster come out of the woods from behind him. He shoots its head down but gets his arm bitten by it and it starts growing purple with poison. He grabs Akira and runs deeper into the forest while the others get surrounded by hundreds of white spider mixed monsters. Shiki wonders what they were and Akio says that they are his siblings and are the failed results of his experiments on his mother. One of the monsters cuts down his silk and lets him down slowly, and Akio reveals that all of them are semi-intelligent and really obedient to him as they recall the words they heard from their mother during her repeated experiments. With that, all the monsters open their mouths and start mimicking the words in Kumi's voice, saying Shiki's name and telling him I love you. Seeing all of this, Shiki starts remembering his mother and breaks down in tears as he falls on his knees and loses his will to fight. Nobumaru praises him for putting up a good fight and asks Kabane what he wanted to do if he was angry. On the other hand, Kabane is already in his Super Saiyan God mode and tells him to shut up. He then walks towards Shiki and asks him if he wants him to do anything about this situation, and Shiki grabs his arm and asks him to help him like Nami from One Piece. With that, Kabane goes full killing mode and starts slaughtering the monsters left and right while letting Nobumaru deal with some as well. Meanwhile, Inugami and Akira get surrounded by a bunch of monsters as well, and Inugami asks Akira to freeze his arm to stop the poison from spreading. Just then, the pink-haired girl from earlier walks out of the forest and tells the monsters to take it easy and makes them stop. She says that they need to heal his arm first and asks him to follow her and to hurry up before Akio notices her. She takes him to a spring and says that its water has special healing properties and the demons who get sick use it to cure themselves, so she thought that it might work on Venom as well. She then says that she needs their help in convincing Kabane and the others to not kill Akio until she gets her answers out of him and walks back with them. On the other hand, Kabane is done with the cleaning duty and walks up to Akio like John Wick while regrowing his severed arm. He grabs him by his collar and throws him towards Shiki, and asks him if he wants to finish this piece of trash off himself or can he do it as well. Shiki stands up and apologizes for making him dirty his hands for his sake and says that he will deal with Akio himself. Just then, the pink-haired girl arrives on the scene alongside Inugami and Akira and asks them to not kill him. Akio calls out to her by her name, Aya, and asks her what she was doing here. She tells him to shut up and to cut his BS act out. Then she asks him to tell her where he hid the cocoon that she created, and he starts smiling, saying that if he doesn't tell them about it, it won't kill him. Shiki wonders why Akio is so worked up about Aya and thinks if she is something really important to him. He finally comes to the conclusion that she must be the result of his important research and decides to listen to her. Just then, Inugami walks up and offers to provide his services as a detective and says that he will find the cocoon for her. He then looks at Akio's dumb face and calls Mihai back home and asks him to do his big brain magic and tell him where he could have hidden a human-sized cocoon. Mihai looks at the data they had been collecting on Akio since before he started his research and points out 4 locations and says that the water spring is the most likely location. Hearing this, Aya and Shiki start running towards the place, and Aya starts walking inside the spring, but Shiki stops her and says that he will go instead. He then dives down, and under the moonlit corner in the spring, he finds his mother lying unconscious, sealed inside a cocoon of pink-colored silk. He then gets attacked by another one of his siblings, but he kills him immediately like the cannon fodder it was and comes up with his mother. The girl starts crying and says that their mother is alive as she is the golden webbing and that she tried to save her mother by wrapping her in her healing silk. Soon everyone arrives on the scene and they find out that Kumi is alive as well. Nobumaru says that there was never a reason for Akio to kill Kumi, as she was his insurance to keep Aya under control as well as a way for him to make more of golden webbing monsters. Shiki then knocks Akio out by punching him hard and tells Inugami that they need to move his mother to a safer place. They decide to take her to the car and go back to Tokyo. Kabane asks Shiki about what he wants to do with Akio, and he says that he will burn down all of his work, and having lived with him for years, he knows that not being able to publish his work and be recognized by anyone would be worse than dying for him. With that, they all go back to Tokyo, while Nobumaru decides to burn Akio up because karma is a Back in Tokyo, Inugami takes them to a special clinic run by someone he knows, and they knock at the door in the middle of the night. He says that it's demon business, and a short old granny opens up the door and lets them inside. Inugami calls her Granny Ohana and asks her to treat Kumi. Inugami reveals that Granny Ohana is full human, and she is an animal doctor, and over the course of her life, she has saved many animal demons as well, and that's why she knows of their existence. To her, all life is worth saving, and so she doesn't discriminate. She lets them all stay for the night and says that Kumi is perfectly healthy and her coma seems to be self-induced due to some psychological trauma. She says that she will heal her up in no time with some medicine and tells them to not worry. Everyone goes to sleep while Shiki remains by Kumi's side and talks to Aya as well, who's wondering if she should even go in because in essence, she is similar to all those monsters that they killed in the forest. Shiki notices her standing outside the door and asks her to come in and says that she should hold her hand because she is her mom as well. She asks him why he isn't killing her like the other monsters, and he says that it's because their mom is alive due to her, and she's the one who took care of her all these years. Hearing this, Aya starts crying and asks if it's up for her to call her mom as well and him her big brother. Soon, Kumi wakes up as well and she hugs both of her children and calls them by their names. After she wakes up, Shiki decides to stay behind until his mom is fully recovered. He also says that he now has a family and will have to think about his life because they for sure can't live on his measly income. Just like that, a whole week passes by making Kabane and Akira missing a lot. One day, Inugami says that he has a mission for the two of them. Just then, Shiki walks in and says that no one talked about him leaving the agency and he won't quit until he fulfills his promise to Kabane about finding his parents. Suddenly, Aya walks in as well and Shiki says that their mom went out today so she left Aya in his care. She starts walking around the office and meets up with Inugami and says that she has a report of her own to make as well. She says that she has decided to work with Granny at the clinic where she would provide her medical services to demons, so she wants him to write up a good contract for her to set up her business. Inugami gets right down to it and Shiki starts complaining that she is only an 8-year-old and she can't be starting a business that early on. He asks Kabane to talk her out of it, but she tells him that she wouldn't have to do it if her brother earned more, and Kabane also says that if she has the right power to do it, then there is no point in stopping her from doing it. Hearing this, Aya says that he is right on point and that she watched him fight in the forest as well and likes how he thinks. She then asks him if he has a girlfriend and tells him to go out with her, and he says ok. Hearing them, Shiki and Akira become surprised, and knowing that his best friend is going out with his little sister makes him faint on the ground as well. Just then, Khan walks in and asks Kabane to fight with her. And then she has grown stronger now, but then she sees Aya wrapped around him and she instantly becomes jealous of her. While they both stare each other down, Inugami asks if they can get to business now and explains their mission. Recently, there have been reports of women having their faces badly injured in Harajuku. He says that while this news is not public, this is most likely the work of a demon as they rip off whole faces with nose, lips, ears, and all. With Shiki and Akira down on the ground due to shock and horror, Aya says that she will go with Kabane and Khan says that she will go as well and keep an eye on them. They go to Harajuku and get stopped by a policeman. Khan tries to show her authority by saying that she is from the police department, but the policeman ignores her and tells her to go place somewhere else. After that, Kabane says that he is from the detective agency, and the policeman lets them in saying he was informed. Once inside, Kabane says that the demonic scent here is quite thick, which means that the culprit must be nearby, and Khan starts walking in front. He says that all the victims so far have been girls, so he should take the lead, but she becomes mad and tells him to mind his own business. But when he says off and walks away with Aya, she feels really sad and doesn't know what to do with the feelings in her chest. Just then, a spirit demon approaches her and offers to help her and goes and pulls Aya up by her hair. Kabane punches the demon down and saves Aya and reveals herself to be the culprit behind the incident and says that she fell in love with a handsome boy across the street, but as a spirit, no one would look at her, so she decided to bar the faces of beautiful women to looks appealing, but it all backfired. Kabane says that love is about giving to others and not taking from them, and the spirit asks him what he knows about love as he can't even treat the girl beside him right, referring to Khan. They turn to Khan and ask her what was up, and she reveals herself to be really angry and says that usually it's so fun being Kabane, but since Aya came, she can't help but feel strange in her chest and tries to attack her, but Kabane saves her and Khan runs away to the park. After that, Aya helps the spirit, but wrapping her in her silk and giving her a nice figure, and they walk back home. Kabane reports that Aya completed the mission on her own, and she gives him a kiss on the cheek and makes Shiki faint once again, asking him if he would approve if she decided to marry Kabane. Once she's gone, Kabane goes out to the park and shakes the tree to make his favorite fox fall down. He comforts her, and this makes Khan happy once again, and she says that all her life she wanted to be Inari's #1, and now she wants to be his #1 as well, and he tells her good luck because he doesn't know what that means. The next morning, Aya walks in to meet Kabane, and Khan also arrives just in time to ask him for a fight. Akira asks him to decide once and for all as to who is going to be his lover, and Kabane, being Kabane, says that if it's a lover, it would be Inugami, referring to what he learned from the cat demon incident and making everyone shocked. On the other hand, it turns out that Inugami went out to help Kumi bury the bodies of all her monster children that died in the forest. A few days later, Akira's elder brother, Yu, comes to Tokyo. Akira and Yu were born in a snow village among the mountains of Amori. Their village had a total population of 200 women, and once every 100 years, a male would be born. However, this time 2 brothers were born and the older one was chosen as the chief of the village. In reality, the women controlled everything from politics to hunting rights in the village. The village's history spoke about a special stone called the Null Stone, which was kept safe above a peak in a shrine located near the village. It is said that the village was built to protect the stone itself, and over the years, it became Yu's duty to look after the villagers and succeed as the new chief. But growing up, he saw the corrupt nature of the village who wanted to keep the power for themselves and decided to run away with his brother. He made an agreement with the women of the village that he would take up the role of the chief if they let his brother go. They did it, but then sent assassins after him once he left. Hearing about this, Yu ran up to the shrine and used the power of the stone to wipe the whole village off the face of the planet and then started walking down to find his brother. On the other hand, Akira was saved by some human travelers who took him to Tokyo, and he has been living with Inugami since to find his brother. Now Yu has finally reached Tokyo as well and is looking for information about Inugami and Akira. Meanwhile, Akira is helping around at the office as usual by being clumsy and useless and making more work for them by messing things up. Shiki and Kabane scold him and call him a good-for-nothing, and this makes him really sad. He also ends up ripping his stuffed toy named after his brother, but Miyai fixes it up and adds some A upgrades in it as well. Feeling sad and heartbroken, Akira leaves a note behind and runs away from the office after packing his stuff. While walking away, he ends up running into his older brother, and they finally get to have a reunion. Yu asks him if he wasn't staying with a man named Inugami, and Akira says that he was, but now he has left the place because he wasn't needed there. Yu says Uck and starts walking out of the city with him. He seems strangely cold even for a snow demon, but Akira doesn't pay any attention to it as he is too happy to finally be together with his brother. Outside the city, Yu asks Akira what kind of a house he would like and then makes a massive castle as per his request. He then walks in and furnishes it with ice-made furniture and asks him if he wanted anything else. Akira decides to take some pictures, but Yu takes his device and breaks it with his foot before freezing it to hell. He says that he will go get some food for them now and then walks out and locks Akira inside the castle with his ice powers. Meanwhile, Kabane and Shiki are having a tough time at the office doing minor chores that Akira used to do. They mess up all sorts of things and even fight among themselves, and this makes them realize that Akira wasn't useless, and they needed him to not fight each other. With that in mind, they both agree to go fetch him and talk to Inugami about it. Inugami agrees, but then he sees a report about a massive ice castle appearing outside the town out of nowhere and a crowd forming around it. They all rush to the location and see Yu walking out of the castle. He tries to attack the people, but Inugami shoots his hand and stops him. Yu asks them who they were, and he says that he is Inugami and notices the null stone embedded in his chest. It is said to be the opposite of the like stone, where it feeds on the user's life force and grants them immense power to destroy everything. He asks him what a demon from the Snow Village is doing here, and Yu says that he doesn't have to answer any of his questions, but because he is the person who took care of his younger brother, he will say thanks. Shiki confirms if he is Akira's brother and asks where he is, and Yu asks them who they were to him. They say that they are his friends, and so he decides to freeze them up and takes them inside to act as decoration for the castle. Meanwhile, Akira finds out that his stuffed toy has a built-in projector and internet connection and uses it to update his Instagram profile. After defeating Inugami and the others, Yu creates a bath and bed for Akira and calls him downstairs to check it out. Akira comes down happily but then falls on his knees as he sees the dead cold statues of his friends and asks his brother why he did all that. His brother asks him if he was feeling well and goes out to get some mint from him. While he is gone, the stuffed toy speaks up and tells Akira that they are not dead and they will need some salt to melt them down. It also asks to be put between the statues so he can warm them up with his mechanical energy. Akira tells his brother that he needs some salt for his skincare, and Yui simply walks out, locking him inside. Once he's gone, Kabane manages to break out of the ice by breaking his body and then regenerating it. He says that he will go and fight Yu and asks Akira to come back to the office and apologies for calling him a good-for-nothing, but Akira knows that his brother is too strong and he doesn't want any of them to get hurt, so he puts up an act in front of Kabane and his brother, who soon come back with some salt. He says that he is done with the agency and tells his brother to leave these people behind as he is bored of them and wants to go live near a beach. Once they are gone, the stuffed toy speaks up and tells Kabane about the real plan of melting Inugami and Shiki out using the salt. Kabane starts working on it, and suddenly Inari walks in from the front door. She asks Kabane if he is feeling like giving her his life stone, and says that the null stone is related to his parents as well. Suddenly, the stuffed toy starts speaking in Inugami's voice, and it explains that it is using his brain waves and body heart to convey this message, and tells Kabane to go after Akira and Yui. He says that Inari won't hurt them just yet, so he doesn't have to worry about it, and tells him to hurry up. With that, Kabane starts running deeper into the forest to find the Snow Demon brothers. Meanwhile, Nobamaru ambushes Yu. Yu traps Akira inside an ice cage and starts fighting Nobamaru like an icebender. Nobamaru goes full Firefox mode and uses his special technique, copyrighted Shadow Clone's jutsu, but Yui easily gets through all of them and keeps him away from himself. With fire and ice clashing, mist starts forming up in the area and Yu becomes distracted for a moment after hearing Akira's voice. Nobamaru uses this chance and tries to snatch the nullstone out of his chest, but as soon as he touches it, his life force starts being sucked and his hand becomes injured. He becomes mad at Inari for using him as bait to test the nullstone's effects and curses her, but then decides to calm down and thinks of his options to take him alive. Just then, Yu attacks him with some ice spears and manages to almost get him, but Kabane arrives just in time to kick him out of the attack's range. He decides to team up with him, and they start thinking of a plan to knock Yu out. Nobamaru says that it would be impossible for them to get close to him without getting frozen, but there might just be a way for Kabane to make it possible. He then sets him up on fire, and Kabane uses it as armor to fight against Yu's cold ice powers. The fight continues for quite some time until Kabane turns into burning bones, but the overuse of Nullstone's power sucks out almost all of Yu's life force, and he starts crumbling down. Akira manages to escape his prison as well and tries to pull the stone out of his brother. When he touches it, all the dark memories about his brother's browser history rushes into his brain and he starts crying, but then Kabane walks up and says that he will help too and spits out the life stone on the Nullstone. And they both end up combining and becoming one piece. And that's what you need to become the Pirate King. With the power of the Nullstone gone, the castle crumbles and Inugami and Shiki also return to normal. Inari tries to get the stone for herself by using Cunning Talk no Jutsu, but Inugami arrives just in time to call her BS out and gets the stone back to Kabane and Yui. After that, they all go to Ohana's clinic and Aya treats their injuries and they all have a heart-to-heart with Yu and Akira. Yu feels responsible for all the lives he has taken and harmed and decides to shoulder this burden all alone, but Akira grows some balls for once in his life and slaps Yu across his face and tells him to stop being an edgelord and to rely on his friends like normal people. With that settled, Kabane asks him if he knows anything about these stones because they might be a way to find his parents, and Yu asks him if he knows about the demon incident, Kimono Jin. Inugami explains that Kimono Jihin is the name of a war between demons and humans that happened 1,000 years ago, and to make sure that it never happens again, the top-tier demons of that time put their powers in these objects and passed them down to their descendants to keep them under control. This means that Kabane's parents could have been the chiefs of a powerful demon clan, and with that knowledge, they can search across the land to see where they were from. With all that decided, Akira says that he will go travel with his brother and take a temporary leave from the agency, while Inugami tells Kabane that they now have a lead on his parents, so they will be traveling as well to find more clues about them. Shiki stays behind with his mother and sister and says that he will take care of the office while they are gone and wishes Kabane good luck. On the other hand, Inari decides to use Khan against Kabane and gives her a mission to win over Kabane's heart and to get the Life and Null stone from him. Before they leave, Kabane asks if he can stop by at the park to meet Khan, and Khan immediately walks out from behind the building and says that she would be going with them as well and becomes excited. Inugami looks at her and says despite knowing that Inari sent her with something evil cooking in her mind. And that's how Season 1 of Kimono Jihin comes to an end.